All right, guys, good evening once again, and welcome to the meeting that we had planned for uh, discussing the research project, the structure that we are supposed to follow, the structure that we are supposed to observe as per guidelines of the university. So in this meeting today, we are going to talk about uh, the research project and its structure. So for a start, uh, this is our topic, as you can see from the screen, research project plan. So this is the topic that we'll be dealing with in this meeting. And the first thing that we will have on our project, the paper that we are supposed to submit to the course, or the paper that we are supposed to submit for marking, is the main cover. So we are now going to look at the main components of a main cover. So a main cover is made up of the name of the person who is writing the research project, or the student in this case. So since you are the student, we expect to see your name at the top of the main cover. So for example, I used the name Kimberly P. Maresha, that's my daughter's name. Let's say my daughter is my student, and she's also writing this research project. So on the main cover, the first cover that we find on your research project, at the top, you are supposed to put your name, or you're supposed to write your name. And your name should be centered. It should be at the top and centered to the mid. Centered, when we talk about being centered, we mean that it should be positioned in the middle of the paper at the top margin. Then after that, we will find a topic after the name of the student, or the name of the candidate, or in this case, after your name. Next, we should see the title of your paper, or the problem that you are dealing with, right? The problem that you have decided to investigate. So in this case, Kimberly is investigating on parenting and monitoring for success. That is verifying parents and educational guidance actions relevant to educational success. Guys, some people are still talking. Can we please pay attention? Okay, so after your name in the middle, at the top, centered at the top, we find the mid section of the paper, the A4 paper, we find your topic or your research problem, or your title, the title of your paper. So in this case, Kimberly's paper is titled Parenting and Monitoring for Success, Verifying Parents and Educational Guidance Action Relevant for Educational Success. That's the title of a paper. And as you can see, this title is also centered. The title of this paper is also centered. It is justified to the center, all right? And it is in the middle of the paper. Then after this title, before we proceed to the next point or to the next item, we also need to understand that your title is supposed to be 10 to 15 words long. 10 to 15 words long. So 10 words or maximum 15 words. If your title is more than 15 words, then you are supposed to have two titles, a main title and a subtitle. For example, if you look at this title here, it has got a main title and a subtitle. So the main title is Parenting and Monitoring for Success. And the subtitle is indicated by the colon. There are two dots that come after the main title. Then we have the subtitle, which is Verifying Parents and Educational Guidance Action Relevant for Educational Success. So as you can see, there are two titles here separated by a colon. If you're not sure what a colon is, aqui estamos a falar de dois pontos. So the two titles are separated by a colon, but this is not obligatory. It's not that everybody is supposed to have two titles. Your title can only be one as long as it is 10 to 15 words long. 10 to 15 words long, all right? Then after the title, we have the name of the university. After the title at the bottom, but also centered, we have the name of the university. And after the name of the university, we have the city in which the university is located. So our university is located in Beira. That's why we have Beira after Universidad Licungo. Then after Beira, we need to have the year in which the paper was written. So your projects were written in this year, 2020. That's why we have 2020 as the last item on our main cover. Then after our main cover, we go to the face cover. There's a second cover that is supposed to be on your research projects. Your research projects are not only supposed to have one cover, they are supposed to have two covers. The main cover and the face cover. All right, so now let us talk about the face cover. So proceeding, as we can see, the face cover here also is written on an A4 paper, just like the main cover. And it also starts with your name at the top margin and also centered in the middle, right? So your name should be at the top, like in this example, and also centered in the middle, like it is in this example. And it is also followed by the title. It is also followed by the title of your paper. The same title that is on your main cover should also be on your face cover. So your face cover is supposed to have your name. The same name that is on your main cover should be on your face cover. The same title that is on your main cover should also be on your face cover. Then after the title, we have this statement here. There is a statement that describes the type of paper this is. It says, research project submitted to the Department of Languages and Communication, Faculty of Letters and Humanities for assessment in Make. So what this statement does is telling us what kind of paper this is and where was it submitted to, or to which department was it submitted, and what was the purpose of writing this paper and submitting it to that department or to the lecturer in that department, right? So you need to have this statement. And this statement also is supposed to feature on most of the assignments you write, or most of the assignments you will be writing to your lecturers, or you'll be submitting to your lecturers for assessment. They should have the main cover and the face cover, and they should have the name, your name at the top, followed by the title and the name of the university, the city, and the year on the main cover. And on the face cover, they should have your name, the title of your paper, the purpose for which the paper was written, and to which department it was submitted, and for what purpose was it written or submitted to that department. Then after that, what comes next is the name of the lecturer. In this case, the person who is assessing you or evaluating you, or the person who is testing you, or the person who is working with you on this subject is me. That's why you see there we have lecturer, colon, then the title, Dr. Felix Maresha. So you are supposed to have the name of the lecturer who is working with you on that specific subject. Since you're working with me in Make, that's why you see my name is on the face cover. I want you to be attentive here. You should note that my name does not appear on the main cover, but it only appears on the face cover. I want you also to note that the statement that describes your paper to the department to which it was submitted and the purpose for which it was written is also appearing only on the second cover, not on the main cover. It's only appearing on the face cover, not on the main cover. All right. So the next item to appear on your face cover is the name of the university, the city, and the year. All right. The name of the university, the city, and the year. But as you can see, these two covers are different in the sense that these two items here, this statement here, and my name only appear on the main cover, not on the, only appear on the face cover and not on the main cover. On the main cover, you only have your name, the title of your paper, the name of the university, the seat in which the university is located, and the year. On your face cover, you have your name, the title of your paper, this statement of purpose, and the name of your lecturer, the university, the city in which the university is located, and the year. All right? Then after the main cover, in this case, after the main cover, we see that we have a face cover. But after the face cover, for this particular assignment, for this research project, what follows the face cover is the contents page, which students normally confuse for an index. In English, index and contents page are different. In English, index and contents page are different. You find an index at the end of a book, and you find a contents page or table of contents at the beginning of a book. So in this case, at the beginning of your research project, you don't put an index, which you call index in Portuguese. It's not the same thing as index in English. What we call index in Portuguese is a table of contents or contents page in English. What we call index in Portuguese is a table of contents or contents page in English. So after this, what you are going to have here is the contents page. As you can see, the contents page here is the third page after the main cover, the face cover, and now you can find our contents page. Our contents page has an outline of the information that we find in our research project. So for example, you have here the word content and on the left, and we have the word page on the right side. So the first item is item 1.0, and item 1.0 is your introduction. So your introduction is numbered 1.0, and this introduction, which is numbered 1.0, can be found on page 1. So it means that if I open your research project, I'm supposed to see inside, when I read the content of your research project, inside your research project, the first item that I'm supposed to see is the item called introduction, which is numbered as 1.0, and it should be on page 1. So if I go to page 1, I should find 1.0 introduction as a subtitle. And after 1.0, I will also find the next item, which is 1.1. So after 1.0, we have 1.1, which is going to be the statement of the problem. So let's say your paragraph, your introductory section covers the whole of page 1, it means that the statement of the problem will be on page 2. So 1.1, which is the statement of the problem, will be on page 2. Then after 1.1, we'll also find another item, which is 1.2, background of the study, which is also going to be on page 2. Mind you here, the number of the page depends on how long your content is. Some of you will have 1.0 on page 1, 1.1 still on page 1, 1.2 on page 1, 1.3 on page 1. It depends on how big are your sections or how big are your paragraphs. You don't have to squeeze everything onto page 1 or onto page 2. These are just examples that I'm showing you. If your introduction goes up to page 5, it means that your statement of the problem will appear on page 6. So that's not a problem. If your introduction is covering 5 pages, that's not a problem. It means your statement of the problem will start on page 6. So it means that your 1.1, instead of being on page 2 as Kimberly's, your 1.1 will be on page 6, right? So don't look at this and think that your project should be like this. They should follow this page numbering. No, that's not the case. I'm just using this to show you as examples, to show you the example of how a contents page looks like. Right, so after the statement of the problem, we still find 1.2 on the same page, on page 2, which is the background of the study. It will still be on the page, or the second page, which is page 2. That's why it's written there, 1.2, background of the study, page 2. And as we continue in your project, we may see the next section or the next part of your research project, which is the objectives of the study, on page 3. So it will be 1.3, the objectives of the study, and these objectives of the study are found on page 3. And as you know, the objectives of the study are divided into 2, right? Some just write them as just objectives of the study, but others, other students separate them, right? Other students separate them. So we have the objectives of the study, and we have 1.3.1 general objective, which is just one general objective. And 1.3.2 will be our specific objectives. So you may possibly have 2 specific objectives for your study or for your research, or 3 specific objectives, or 4 specific objectives. It all depends on how you plan to do your work or what you intend to achieve. Then after your objectives, your general objective and your specific objectives, maybe all this subsection covers page 3. And as you proceed with your writing, you may start this other section, which is section 1.4, the research questions, where you're going to write down the questions that are going to guide your research, or the questions that you intend to answer with your research. So normally we have a general question, which is just one question, a general question that your study intends to answer. And we also have specific questions, which are also divided into 2 sections. 1.4.1, the general question, 1.4.2, specific questions. So 1 general question, and you may have 2 specific questions, or 3 specific questions, or 4 specific questions. It's all up to you. You decide what you want to bring into your study, into your research, or into your research project, because you are the one who is writing the research project. So the number of questions you bring, specific questions, all depend on what you want to achieve and what you're trying to do. Then after the research questions, you can also write a hypothesis. Let's say you've identified a problem and you think that problem is caused by something, but you need to investigate that cause in order to verify if it's exactly what is causing that problem. For example, we're talking about COVID-19, the coronavirus, right? Um, it was believed that it was passed from animals to human beings. Then at the beginning, there was information that it cannot be passed from one human being to another, which was not true. So the hypothesis could be coronavirus is passed from from an animal to a human being, and there is no human to human contamination or human to human transmission, right? But the studies have to be done in order to verify whether that supposition is true or not. Or we can have another hypothesis. For example, let's say we are talking about students failing in school, right? So we can say students fail in school, or children fail in school because they don't have the support they are supposed to have from home. We are saying that when students are at home, they are not being supported by their parents or by their educational guardians. So as a result, they are failing in school. And we also hope to see that if we have a change in the level of support that children get at home or get from home, then they will improve their pass rate, or they will improve their success will improve in school, because they are having or they are getting the support that they need from home. So hypotheses are basically statements that establish a condition, or that is establish a variable that can be changed or manipulated, and its result. For example, if you eat a lot of fat, or a lot of sugar, you grow fat, right? If you eat a lot of sugar, you grow fat. So that's a hypothesis. It means that you becoming fat depends on the amount of sugar you eat. And if the sugar is increased, then we expect to see the person growing fatter. But if the sugar is reduced, we expect that person to slim down, right? To grow slimmer. So these are statements that we use to establish a relationship between variables. One that is an independent variable and another that is an independent variable. But not all researches should have hypotheses. Your research should have an hypothesis if you're starting from a preconceived notion. You have some knowledge or some notion about the problem you are investigating. You have read some books, you have read some research studies, and you know a little bit about that problem. So you can bring in a hypothesis that was produced in another research to test it in your research. And most of the times, qualitative studies produce hypotheses. For example, studies that seek to understand the behavior, the people's behavior, people's opinions. They start without a hypothesis. They start without a preconceived notion. They gather as much information as they can in order to produce these hypotheses. So, for example, if we don't understand a situation, what we are basically going to do is to go to the field, ask people about that situation, and get information from the people, get information, opinions from those people, and try to make sense of those opinions or that information in order to explain that issue or that problem or that phenomenon. So as we do that, as we gather information and then manage to explain the notion or the problem that was being investigated, we are coming up with hypotheses that explain why that problem we were investigating exists. All right. So those who are doing qualitative research, some of you won't need to have a hypothesis, because qualitative research is basically designed to produce hypotheses. So those who are doing quantitative research studies, you need to have hypotheses that you maybe will have to test to confirm or reject. All right. And after the hypothesis, you have 1.6, which is also on page 5, 1.6, which is also on page 5, which is the subtitle called The Rationale of the Study, right? The rationale of the study. So here we want to simply explain or show people why we are doing this study. In what sense is the study important? What has motivated us to do this study? So we want to show the importance of the study and why we ended up deciding to research on this problem. What is the logic behind the execution or the conducting of this research or of this study? And it's also important to mention who is going to benefit from your study. Is it the students? Is it the parents? Is it the teachers? Is it the society? Who is going to benefit from your study? So when you do a research study, it's because you have identified a problem that you want to solve. And if you manage to solve that problem, who is going to benefit from the solution? So you need to tell us that upon completing my study, these are the people who are going to benefit from the results of this study. If you think the people who are going to benefit are the teachers, tell us that teachers will benefit from this study. And you can actually tell us how or in what way they will benefit from the study. All right? And you can also give us an outline of the paper, how your paper is organized. You can tell us what will be found in chapter 1, or what chapter 1 is all about, what is discussed in chapter 1, and after chapter 1, which chapter comes next, and what does it talk about. After the next chapter, you talk about the following chapter until you finish telling us about the structure of your paper. For example, you can say chapter 1 of this, or section A, or the first section of this research project is the introduction. It's called introduction. In this introduction, I introduce the reader or my audience to the problem that I'm planning to investigate or to research on. And the things that I talk about in this chapter are how I discovered the problem, what the problem is exactly, how many people have discussed the problem, or how many people have researched, or how many scientists have researched on the problem, and what results did they come up with. You also talk about the objectives. My objectives in doing this research are A, B, C, and D. And I will also consider 5 questions, 1 general question, and 4 specific questions. And I'm also I also discuss about the importance of this study, or what motivated me to start this research. And I also talk about who is going to benefit from this research. Then after chapter 1, which is called introduction, in which I will discuss all these things that I've mentioned, I will go, my paper will also have another chapter called literature review, which is the second chapter. In that chapter, I will talk about A, B, C, and D. And after the second chapter, I will have another chapter, which is the third chapter, which talks about research methodology. And in this chapter, I talk about A, B, C, and D. So you'll be telling us the structure or the organization of your paper. So let me see if I can find an example here on my other laptop, but I'm not sure if it's going to, it's just switched off because it has got no power, but it's okay. So I wanted to find an example of a paper that expands on these items that we've been talking about in this first part, or in this first part of our meeting. But what I will simply do is after this meeting, I will send you the paper from one of my students who has already defended. But this is not a project. This is the actual dissertation. But it also follows. It basically follows the structure of the research project. But the research project should be a summarized version of the dissertation, because there are other things that you won't have, like the data. You won't have the data because at this moment, you don't need to go to the field to collect data. You are just writing a plan for your study or a plan for your research. All right. So now let's go to the next slide. So the next slide here, we are now talking about chapter 1. But we have already seen that in chapter 1, we have the first item, which is 1.0, introduction. So in your chapter 1 is called introduction. And within this chapter, you need to have an introduction as well, a paragraph that introduces your topic or what you are going to discuss, your content for this chapter, the content that you are going to discuss in this chapter. So introduction, for example, this student here, we said this student is Kimberly, right? So Kimberly is talking about the collaboration between the school and home, right? So she's trying to see how the school and home can work together to help students succeed in school. So she's basically focusing on education in general. So maybe in her introduction, what she will start by doing is talking about education in general, defining what she believes education is, and talking about the importance of education, and talking about the contribution of education on society or on development. You see, she'll be talking about education in general. Education is this, education does this, education does that. Education helps understand this, it helps understand that. Education helps people to open their minds and learn about other things, or have ideas about this or ideas about that. She will just look at education in general, and she may be quoting people, for example, saying, Maresha 2009 said education does this or education does that. Manuel, say in 2014 said education does this or education does that. Ban Ki-moon said education is important because of this or that. Joseph said education is a human right that should be provided to everyone. You see, so you'll be talking about the importance of education, but your main aim is to focus on how parents and teachers can work together and support each other in helping their children with their schoolwork so that they succeed in education. But you start talking about education in general or in a broad sense. Then you narrow it down to your specific problem. So the next thing here will be your statement of the problem, 1.1. So you said that you talked about education and how it is important and what it does to society, how it helps society develop, how it helps people move from poverty to riches, let's say riches, or from poverty to a middle standard lifestyle or middle class lifestyle, right? So now you talk about the problem that you have observed in education. So you have observed that students are failing a lot in school, or students are not learning or acquiring the skills that they're supposed to acquire in school. So your problem will be, while education is important and indispensable to development or to a society or a country's development, the problem that we have noticed is that students are progressing from grade 1 to grade 2 to grade 3 to grade 4 until grade 7. without learning to read or write. So we are saying that education is important, but we have observed that there's a problem here. The children or the pupils we are sending to school are not learning in the way that we expect them to learn. So that's our problem. We are sending children to school, but they don't learn, or they are failing to learn, or they are failing to grasp the concepts that they are being taught in school. So it means that if they're failing to grasp the content that they are supposed to be learning in school, they are likely going to fail, and they will probably not contribute to the development of our country, because we said for our country to develop, we need good quality education. So what is the problem? The problem is we are not having good quality education. The problem is children are not learning what they are supposed to learn, right? So that will be your problem. So you need to say the problem we have noticed, or the problem we have identified, or I have identified, or the researcher has identified. Mind you, you need to use the third person, the researcher, right? The problem that the researcher has identified is that children are not acquiring basic numeracy and literacy skills, which is going to affect the development of the society. If we don't have a society that is educated, then our society is not going to develop, because we need an educated society for us to be able to develop. So that will be your problem. Then the next one is background of the study. In the background of the study, you have to find researches, other researches that talk about your topic. If you're talking about education or the quality of education, there are a lot of papers published on the issue of poor quality education. So you can find those papers. So you can find those papers and read them. Then you can summarize them. You can summarize one by one, telling people that A, B, C, and D investigated this problem, and they found out that, you say what they found out, or they came up with a solution to this problem. Their solution was this, or they came up with a solution to that problem, and this was their solution, or this is their solution. And you can actually analyze the different solutions presented by different researchers and tell us what you think about those solutions. Do you think they are effective in solving the problem? Do you think they are not effective in solving the problem? Do you think they missed something very important that could have helped in solving the problem? And if you find those weaknesses, you can focus on those weaknesses in your research in order for you to be able to do your research and cover those aspects that were not covered by other researchers. So you are simply telling us that this problem is not new. It has been identified or observed by other people, and these people did some research on the problem, and these are the solutions that they presented in order to try and solve this problem and that problem. But they also missed this area that I think it's important that we investigate it or research it and cover it or find information to deal with this section. All right? Then we go to the next point, the objectives of the study. What are the objectives? What is the general objective? What do you want to do? For example, if we're talking about poor quality education and we want to encourage the collaboration between the school and the home or the community, maybe our objective is to raise awareness to parents. General objectives, we want to raise awareness to parents that they need to collaborate with schools to support their children. Or we want to tell parents that they need to work with the school. They need to check their children's exercise books. They need to call their child's teacher to find out how the child is behaving in school. We want to raise this awareness, tell the parents that educating children or educating pupils is not only the responsibility of the school, but it's also the parents or the educational guardians' responsibility. So one of the objectives would be maybe to raise awareness on the need to participate, or the need of parents and educational guardians to participate in the education of their children. And another objective maybe could be helping find strategies that could help parents in participating in their children's educational activities. For example, some parents will say, I cannot read, I cannot write, I did not go to school, so I don't know how to participate in my child's education. I don't know how to support my child. So your study, or one of your objectives will be maybe to devise strategies or to come up with strategies or ideas that can help these parents who did not go to school, who cannot write, who cannot read, to help their children, to support their children in their educational or school activities. You can tell them like, we understand that you did not go to school, you cannot read, you cannot write, but you can still do this to support your child. You can still do that to make your child feel that you are interested or involved in their education. That would be maybe one of other objective. Then another objective could be maybe finding strategies that are effective in helping children succeed in school. For example, if you find a child who is very successful in school, you can ask the parent, like, what do you do at home that helps your child to succeed in school? So the parent will say, I pay for a tutor, or I pay for extra lessons. I cannot read, yes, I did not go to school, but I can pay somebody to come and teach my child, to come and help my child do their homework, to come and explain how to solve mathematical problems to my child. So I cannot read, I cannot write, but I pay somebody to come and do that for me. Then maybe another parent will say, but in my case, I'm poor, I cannot afford to pay a tutor. So what should I do? Then you can say, oh, maybe you can find a brother from church who is willing to help, to volunteer to come and help your child. Or you can find a neighbor who is at university, or who is in grade 10 or grade 12, who can come and help your child with their homework for 30 minutes without you having to pay. So you find somebody, that friend, that relative, that neighbor who is willing to help, and you ask them for help. You know what? I cannot read, I cannot write, but I want my child to be supported in his or her educational activities. Can you help me with that? I cannot pay you, but I just want you to help me. If that person is willing to help and can help, they are going to come and help. So you say one of the specific objectives is to find ways for helping parents who cannot read and write in participating in their children's education. So we want to find ways to help these parents who cannot read and cannot write to participate in their children's education. You cannot read, you cannot write, but you can still do this to support your child in their education. And sometimes if a child is young, maybe you can't read, you can't write. When a child comes from school, you can simply say, can I see your exercise book? Can you open your exercise book and show me where you wrote today's activities? Then the child will open the page where they wrote that day's activities. And then you can ask them to read for you. Can you read for me what is written here? What were you talking about? Explain to me. And your child will be afraid to not write because they know that when I go home, my father or my mother is going to ask me to show them what I wrote in school and what I understood. So I have to explain. So your child will be forced or compelled to participate, to actively participate in the lessons, right? Actively participate in the lessons because they know that my father or my mother will check as I get home, right? So these will be your objectives. And we talked about the research questions, right? So your research questions will be what strategies, for example, we're talking about collaboration or collaboration between home and school. So maybe one of the questions could be, how can uneducated parents or parents who cannot read or write help their children with their schoolwork, right? Aquele pai ou aquela mãe que não sabe ler nem escrever, como é que ela pode ajudar o seu filho com o trabalho da escola? So you are going to research because you want your research to help you answer this question. So you're going to ask people, like, how do you think somebody who cannot read or write can support or help their children with schoolwork? And people will tell you what they think. I think they can do this, or I think they can do that. Then you compile that information. And you have as many questions as you want under this section. So it's up to you to write the number of questions you want. And we talked about the hypothesis right at the beginning, so I'm not going to repeat that. We talked about the rationale of the study. I'm not going to repeat that. We also talked about the beneficiaries of the study, who is going to benefit from the study. I'm also not going to repeat that. And we talked about the structure of the paper. I'm also not going to repeat that. Then another thing that you need to have is a summary. So if you have an introduction at the top, right? You have an introduction at the top, which is the paragraph that is starting your chapter or your section. It means that you also need to have a summary at the end. So the first thing is your introduction, and the last thing is a summary. So the summary should tell us what was discussed within this section and what conclusions were reached in this section. So it's a short paragraph that describes what was done in this section and what conclusions were reached in that same section. Then you go to the second chapter, and the second chapter or the second section, depending on however you want to organize your paper, you can say chapter 2 or section B, depending on however you're organizing your paper. But I prefer to use chapters. Chapter 1, which is called Introduction, and chapter 2, which is Literature Review. So in chapter 2, which is Literature Review, it's here where you discuss the literature that discusses your topic. You find papers, research papers, articles, dissertations, books, everything that talks about your topic and you think is relevant for discussion in your research project. And you read that information, summarize it, synthesize it, analyze it, and discuss it in this section. And you also start with an introduction here. You also start with an introduction, just like in chapter 1. So this section here, you have 2.0. 2.0 will be introduction. This is an introduction to a chapter called Literature Review. So maybe in your introduction, you will say, in this section, the researcher is going to review literature that is relevant to the topic under investigation. So in the literature review, the researcher is going to talk about A, B, C, and D, right? You state the things that the researcher is going to talk about, and you can actually state the order in which they will be presented or the order in which they will be discussed. And after the introduction, maybe you are talking about parenting. So you can start by defining what is parenting. If your topic is about parenting, for example, Kimberly is talking about parenting. She's talking about parenting and monitoring for educational success. So she's talking about parenting, she's talking about monitoring, she's also talking about educational success. So in her literature review, maybe she will need to define the concept of parenting. So she will start, after the introduction, she will put 2.1, what is parenting? Then she will find books that define parenting. Maybe she will find 3 or 4 books that will define parenting, and she will discuss this information in this section. For example, Hama says parenting is A, B, C, and D, or Joseph says parenting is A, B, C, and D, or Andrew says parenting is this. And she will discuss all the information under the subheading, what is parenting. She'll tell us what parenting is. When she thinks that she's happy with her discussion on parenting, she will go to the next concept or the next subsection, what is monitoring. Remember, we said she's talking about parenting, monitoring for educational success. So parenting and monitoring for educational success. So after defining parenting or discussing the concept of parenting, she will also discuss the concept of monitoring. What is monitoring? So she will also read papers that talk about monitoring or define monitoring. She will say, according to Manjama, monitoring is this. Also, Magaya says monitoring is this. So she'll talk about monitoring and quote people who define monitoring, and she'll discuss that concept of monitoring. Then when she's happy, she'll talk about the strategies that parents use to parent their children or to take care of their children or to bring up their children. How do parents bring up their children? So we have different strategies that parents use to bring up their children. So you go and read papers that talk about parenting strategies. What is parenting in general? Then you talk about parenting for a specific purpose. So we have parenting in general. Then we have parenting for success, parenting for educational success. How do you educate your kids at home in general terms, right? Or how do parents educate their children at home in general terms? But we can also talk about how parents educate their kids to succeed in school. What do parents tell their children to do so that they succeed in school? How do parents monitor their children's activities to succeed in school? Do you switch off the TV and make your students do their homework? Or you tell them that they can still watch TV whilst they're doing their homework, right? And what time are your children supposed to do their homework? Do they have to wait for you to come from work so that they do their homework, or they have to do their homework before you come back from work, and as soon as you get home from work, they should come with their homework exercise book and present it to you and say, I had homework today, I've already done my homework, here is my homework, can you check if what I did was correct or not? But in general, we were talking about parenting in general. How do you bring up your children? Do you let them watch TV the whole night knowing that they have school tomorrow? Do you leave your children watch TV until 4 a.m. and they go to bed at 5 a.m., then wake up at 6 a.m. to go to school? Or you tell your children that during the week, nobody should watch TV after 2100 hours. Everybody watches TV up to 2100 hours. As soon as the news ends or finishes, everybody should go to bed so that you wake up rejuvenated tomorrow, ready for school. Or you can say, I'm going to sleep. You can watch TV as long as you want. Then you just get up and bath and go to school. So that is parenting in general. So we're talking about the different parenting strategies. How do you parent your children, or how do you bring up your children in general, and how do you bring up your children for them to succeed in school? There are researches, books, and papers that talk about all those things. This is just an example that I'm using. Everybody has got his or her own topic. So you should look at your topic and decide what titles or subtitles you are going to include in your literature review. So the next, since Kimberly is talking about parenting, she's talking about monitoring for educational success. The next group of concepts that she's going to discuss in her literature review is monitoring strategies. What is monitoring in general? How do parents monitor for success, for educational success, just like she did with the parenting strategies. And she can talk about educational partnerships. For example, here we're talking about the collaboration between the home and the school, or the school and the community. Teachers in school and parents at home, or educational guardians at home. How should they collaborate? How should they communicate? Should parents have their children's teachers' numbers, phone numbers? Should parents visit the school to talk to their children's teachers? On what intervals, or what frequency should they be visiting the school? Should they visit the school every week, every month, every day, every term, every year? Why should they be going to school? Or should they just call the teacher and check, oh, how is my boy behaving in school? How is my girl behaving in school? Right? And should they just call and ask, how can I help my child? I've noticed that my child is having problems on this area or in this subject. How do you think I can help her? Or I want you to give my child extra work in this subject so that they can improve, because I'm not happy with their performance, or I'm not happy with their marks. So educational partnerships. Maybe maybe Kimberly will start by defining what educational partnerships, and discuss a few educational partnerships that exist between parents and the school. Then she will proceed to talk about, I think this rationale of the study is not supposed to be here, so ignore the rationale of the study. Just ignore this 2.6, ignore it. So 2.7 is supposed to be 2.6. Parental involvement. Since we're talking about educational partnerships, monitoring, and parenting for educational success, so here we need to talk about parental involvement. We need to read papers that talk about how parents get involved in the education of their children, right? How do parents get involved in the education of their children? What channels do they use to communicate with the school? What do they do at home? What do they do in school? Do they go to the school and volunteer to participate in one or two activities? Do they volunteer to be part of the school committee, the parents committee, or part of the school board representing the parents and educational guardians? So what do parents do in order to be involved in the education of their children? Then we have 2.8, educational achievement. Maybe she's going to discuss what educational achievement is and how it can be attained, right? What needs to be done for children to succeed in school. Then after that, if she's happy with these sections, she can finish a chapter by summarizing what she discussed in the whole chapter. She can finish a summary by summarizing what she discussed in this whole chapter and the conclusions she reached when she was discussing the literature. Then we go to the third chapter, which is research methodology. Remember, I sent you some articles that discuss the different types of research, the researches that exist. We have qualitative research, we have quantitative research. Under qualitative research and quantitative research, we've got different types of research or research designs. We have ethnography, case study, experiments. Those are the different types of research that exist. So you decide whether your research should be done as a qualitative research or a quantitative research. But remember, this chapter also starts with an introduction. Since it's a new chapter, it starts with an introduction. Then you talk about the type of research, what your research is going to be, which type, qualitative or quantitative. Is it going to be a case study? Is it going to be ethnography? Is it going to be I'm trying to, philosophical. I was trying to find the other term. There are many terms that you find that define type of research. And you can talk about data collection. How are you going to collect your data? How are you going to collect your data? Are you going to use questionnaires? Are you going to use interviews? Are you going to observe lessons? How are you going to collect your data? So you need to explain that your data will be collected through interviews, or your data will be collected through observations, or you are just going to collect papers or articles or documents and read them to analyze them and find the information you want to include in your research and discuss it. And this is what I was talking about. So data collection procedures, how are you going to collect the data? Who are you going to ask for the data? Are you going to ask teachers? Are you going to ask parents? Are you going to ask students? Are you going to ask headmasters? Who are you going to collect your information from? And how? Are you going to visit a school? Are you going to meet people in a restaurant? Or are you going to invite them for lunch? How are you going to do it? And for how long? Are you going to visit them for a month, 2 months, 3 months? Right? And the research instruments, those are the research instruments: questionnaires, interviews, observation checklists, or documents. Right? And research setting, where is your research going to be conducted? Are you going to do your research at Manga Secondary School? Are you going to do your research at Mutemba? Are you going to do your research at a school in Kilimani? Are you going to do your research at a school in Gorongosa? You decide the research setting, like where you're going to do your research. But whatever setting you choose, make sure that the problem you are trying to investigate is present in that setting. If you want to talk about disruptive behavior, for example, you should make sure that the school that you're going to work with has problems of disruptive behavior. And your research population, I've already talked about that. Who are you going to work with? Are you going to work with grade 8 students, grade 10 students? Are you going to work with English language teachers only? Are you going to work with all teachers? Are you going to work with female teachers? Are you going to work with male teachers? You decide who is going to be your research population. And you also need to talk about how you are going to choose them. How are you going to choose the people? Are you just going to get to a school and say, you should participate in my research, you should participate in my research? Or there is a specific way that you're going to use to choose the people, or criteria that you're going to use to choose the people. And you should also talk about how you're going to analyze the information, or how you're going to organize the information that you're going to collect from your research participants. Are you going to analyze it using descriptive statistics, content analysis, narrative analysis, discourse analysis, grounded theory? You need to read about all these data analysis procedures to know what they mean and decide which data analysis procedure is important or is applicable to your type of research. Then if you are happy with your chapter 3, you just write your summary. You summarize what you were talking about or what you were discussing in your paper or in your section or your chapter 3 or your third section of your research project. Then after that, since this is still a research project, you are not yet going to the field to collect data. You are not going to interview people here. You are not going to observe people here. You are not going to give people questionnaires to respond to. You are still planning to do that. So this is your plan of how you're going to do all that until you finally get to the point of going to the field and doing the data collection, the actual data collection. So in this case, you don't have any data. You have instruments and ways in which you are going to, from which you are going to manage to collect your data, which you are going to use to collect your data. So the next section that you have here is the section about your timeline, your research timeline. So your research timeline, if you want, you can have an introduction talking about your research timeline, like for how long will you be doing a certain activity? For how long will you be collecting data? For how long will you be collecting literature? For how long will you be reading literature? For how long will you be organizing literature? For how long will you be designing your research instruments, like the questionnaire that you're going to use? How long is it going to take you to design it? Is it going to take you 2 weeks? Is it going to take you 3 weeks? Is it going to take you 1 day? So you need to talk about every aspect and tell your audience how long it's going to take you. For example, if you have already started writing your project, you may actually tell us when you identified your problem. When did you identify your problem? Did you identify your problem in February? Did you identify your problem in March? Or how did you come to identifying your problem? How long did it take you to identify a problem? Was it just 1 day, like, oh, I've already found a problem? Or you took 2, 3 weeks or 1 month to identify a problem that you were interested in investigating on? And how long did it take you to collect or search for relevant literature, the literature that you're going to discuss in the literature review? How long did it take you to get that literature? Did you get it in 2 months, 3 months, 1 week, 1 day? How long did it take you to collect the literature that you're going to use or organize it? That is like reading the literature, analyzing the literature, summarizing the literature, synthesizing the literature. How long did all that take? Or how long is it going to take? Because you are still organizing, you're still planning. So you can actually predict that, oh, I think I'm going to take or to need 2 months to collect literature, or 3 months to collect literature, or 2 months to analyze, 2 months to read, 2 months to organize, 2 months to summarize, 2 months to synthesize. So you determine the amount of time that you are going to spend on each aspect or on each item. And how long did it take you to design the research? Design your research project, think about your research questions, the statement of the problem, the objectives of the study, the hypothesis, writing the plan itself, right? How long did it take for you to do all these things? And how long do you think it is going to take you to collect the data? Are you going to collect the data in 3 months? Are you going to collect the data in 2 months? Are you going to collect the data in 6 months? How long do you think how much time do you think you need to be able to collect your data? How much time do you think you need to organize your data? How much time do you need to analyze, interpret, and discuss your data? How much time do you need to write your paper? You need to talk about that in timeline. So your timeline could be something like this. So So your timeline um, could be something like this. So what is a timeline? A timeline is a research project timeline is an indispensable tool that outlines the milestones to be achieved by the researcher while conducting his research. It helps the researcher to focus, keep track, and audit their activities. Hence, it is useful for assessing progress. So a timeline is important because it can help you to be focused. It can help you to assess whether you are progressing or not, to find out what you have achieved and what you still need to achieve, what you have done successfully or what you still need to work on or to improve, right? So that's what a timeline is. That's what a timeline is. And since we're talking about identifying a problem, your timeline is supposed to involve all these aspects like identifying a problem, right? So when did you identify the problem? You know that research starts with the identification of a research problem. So when, how long did it take you to identify a problem? And how long did it take you to search for relevant literature after the problem was identified, right? So as you know that after you identify a problem, you search for relevant literature. After the problem is identified, the researcher searches for literature that is relevant to the topic, literature that is recent, and literature that is reliable. Then after that, we also know that the researcher organizes, analyzes, summarizes, and synthesizes the literature. So how long did that take you to do? And we also have the next one, which is design and plan the research. Based on the research problem identified and the literature review findings, the researcher designs and plans the study. So how long is that going to take you? You also have another one, which is submit the research for approval. After defining the research design and planning the researcher submits the project for approval. So for example, after you have written your research project, considering all these aspects and you are happy, you submit it to me so that I can assess it or read it and mark it for approval, or to tell you what you need to improve on, or what you need to change, what you need to add, what you need to subtract, what you need to consider, right? So you submit your research project for assessment or for approval. Then you also collect, organize, analyze, and interpret and discuss data. So this is the time where you need to go to the field and talk to people so that you get opinions, their opinions on the problem that you are researching on or investigating. Then after that, you are happy with the information you collected from the field, you can write up your results or your research findings. And while you're writing up your research findings, you'll be updating the literature, summarizing the literature, concluding, and suggesting. So for example, if your research is going to take you 4 years, it means that throughout this period, new information will be emerging. So some new researches will be done, and new findings will start emerging in the academic environment. So you need to go after that information that is relevant to your study and update your literature review. All right? You need to go after that information and update your literature review. You need to, then after you are happy with the updates, the summaries, the conclusions, and the suggestions, you edit and proofread the paper, the dissertation, the final paper, and you submit the final paper for marking, to be marked. All right, so here we have the budget. We also need to have a budget, right? We also need to have a budget. Because when you do research, you need to have money to pay for certain services. For example, you need to buy stationery, you need to buy pen, paper. If you have your own printer, maybe you need to buy ink, those printer cartridges or toner. You need to buy a digital audio recorder to record your interviews. You go and interview somebody, you need to buy an audio recorder. So I've given some examples here of the amount that you need. For example, to buy paper, maybe you need 1,500 to buy paper, because you need paper to be able to print your questionnaires. The questionnaires that you are going to distribute to people, you need paper to be able to print them. The project that you are going to submit for assessment or for marking, you need to print it, so you need paper. The dissertation that you are going to write, you have drafts and other copies or different copies before you produce the final version. You also need paper to print it. And interviews, digital audio recorder. But you also need to travel to your research site. If you live in Basha and you need to do your research in Dondo, you need money to travel to Dondo. You need money for fuel, or you need money for transport, bus from Beira to Dondo, depending on where you'll be doing your research. So you need to budget for transport. So I gave an example there of transport, 4,500 Metcash. You need to have your dissertation or your research project typed. If you don't have a laptop, maybe you go to Makininu to get your project typed in Makininu. You need to pay those people in Makininu to type your project, right? So maybe you are going to budget 1,000 for typing. And printing, if you don't have a printer at home, maybe you need to go to Breatho to get your project printed, or to get your dissertation printed. You need to budget for printing. So I budgeted 2,000 Metcash. And you also need to have your paper bound. It needs to be bound. You also need to budget for binding. I budgeted 1,000 Metcash for binding. So these are just examples of the money you need. So you have to assess your situation and think about the amount of money you need and how you can get that money, right? So the total for my research is 25,000 Metcash, right? But everybody has got their own research and they've got their own needs. You know what you need for your research and where to get it and how much it costs. So you can find information on the costs of whatever you are trying to buy for your research project. So that is the budget. So now I was talking about the research work plan. Remember, we talked about the activities, we talked about identifying a research project. So for example, if you look at this research work plan, you will understand that this person here identified their research problem between February and March. So from the beginning of February up to the end of March, this is when they identified their research problem. So they are showing the research problem on the identification of the research problem on the work plan. That's why you have here, identify a research problem. So it took them from February to the beginning of April to identify a problem. And in this period that they identified the research problem, they started looking for literature. For example, they started looking for books, journal articles, research papers, dissertations that talk about their problem. So from the time that they were working on identifying their problem, they were already collecting literature, relevant literature to use in their research project and the research itself. And at the same time, but now you can see that the collection of literature or gathering literature started at the same time as the identification of the problem, but it went longer than the identification of the problem. It went longer than the identification of the problem. When the identification of the problem ended right at the beginning of April, the collection or gathering of literature ended right at the beginning of May. And another activity that was happening simultaneously is the organization, the reading, the analysis, and the summarizing and synthesizing of the literature, which also started in February, but ended around mid-May. All right? And another activity started, which is design and plan the research. After finding the problem, finding the literature, organizing the literature, reading the literature, analyzing, summarizing, and synthesizing the literature, then the researcher here started designing and planning the research. So here they were now writing the research project. And after that, at the beginning of June, they submitted their research project for approval. And let's hope that the project was approved at the beginning of July. And after the project was approved at the beginning of July, the students had already started updating the literature on their topic. So they were looking for new publications or new researches on their topic and updating their literature. And as they were doing so, they also started collecting, organizing, analyzing, interpreting, and discussing the data, right? Which started in July and continued all the way to November. And from August to November, the student was now writing their dissertation because they have the information they need. For example, the data they've collected from the field. Now they are organizing the data, analyzing the data, interpreting and discussing the data. Now they write the dissertation. They write their findings or their research report, reporting what they found through their research or their investigation. At the same time, they will be updating the literature. Then they will edit and proofread the dissertation in order to check for mistakes. Here they will edit and proofread the dissertation to check for mistakes. And after they are happy with the editing and the proofreading, then they submit the final version of the dissertation for marking. So all this process starts with a research project and it ends with a dissertation or a research report. And this brings us to the end of our session on the structure of the research project. So I just hope that you covered these basics in your research project. I hope that you covered these basics in your research project. If you didn't cover these basics in your research project, I would like to advise you to go and revise your research project so that you try to include most, if not all, of these aspects that we were talking about in this session. If you have any questions, I think I will just stop sharing my screen so that we can start interacting. We can start talking. For those who can talk, you can ask the questions. Let me just unmute everybody so that we can now talk. All right. So if there are any questions, we can ask the questions and we can discuss them here. If you have any questions, just let me know. Anybody with a question?
I don't have question.
Sorry?
I don't have any question.
Okay. Any other student with a question? Hello?
I think they are sleeping.
Sorry? Hello? Yes? Okay. Are you saying something? Please say something. Hello, did you have any question?
I think there is no question.
I did.
I can't hear you. I don't know what's the problem. Maybe your maybe the internet is not good. Maybe we can chat here. All right. So let me see what people were saying here. I'm in. I think we should mute our audio. There's a lot of noise. Okay, I mean now I can't hear nothing. From the authority teacher, some students are asking for your permission to get in the meeting. Your permission. That's what I was saying. Like at the beginning, that this were getting into the meeting and they were leaving the meeting, so I wasn't sure what was going on. I couldn't be allowing them into the meeting and out of the meeting, so that was a little bit complicated. We were supposed to be in the meeting at the same time that the meeting started. All right, so if there are no questions, I think we can end the meeting here. Maybe I'll try and upload this onto YouTube. I'll try and upload this information onto YouTube and ask you to and send you the link so that you can go and watch on YouTube, or even those who do not participate in the meeting. I'll send them a link to watch the meeting. So maybe we stop here, right? Hello? Can we finish the meeting here?
I think we can end.
I've just typed the message there.
Sorry, teacher.
Hello?
Good night.
Good evening.
We have learned down.
Hello? Okay, I think we're going to end the meeting here. So I'll try to upload the video to YouTube, then I'll send the link. All right, good night and bye. See you.
Bye.
And I will also talk about the deadline for submitting the project on the WhatsApp group. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, bye-bye.
You too. Bye.